Are you a leader navigating burnout, doubt, or growth? Welcome to the Ripple Effect Leadership Podcast, where intentional leadership creates lasting impact. Hi, I'm Jen Brown with my co-host Hugo Rodriguez, and we're diving into real leadership stories and practical insights to help you lead with clarity, courage, and connection. Because we believe great leadership creates positive ripples at work and in life.
Hello to our listeners and followers. I am Jen Brown, a leadership coach with Journey of Grace Coaching and a former U.S. diplomat of 23 years, where I had the pleasure of serving with my good friend and colleague, Hugo Rodriguez. Hugo, over to you.
Thank you, Jen. And every time you say that, it makes me smile inside because it was such a pleasure working with you. My name's Hugo Rodriguez, as Jen said, a Foreign Service officer, retired, and currently a professor of practice in leadership and a leadership coach as well. And I'm super proud of the time I had the chance to work with Jen in the State Department. And today, I'm doubly proud because we are bringing on another great former State Department leader, someone that Jen and I both worked with on all kinds of really hot-button issues and high-pressure situations. Carrie Muntean is joining us. And Carrie is, well, I'll let her introduce herself, but I will just say she's an amazing leader and coach as well. Carrie, tell us.
Before you say that, Hugo, can I jump in? How exciting that we have Carrie, because she is the upcoming author of Strategic Humanity, a book about leadership that is coming out in February. So we are bringing State Department leadership here, and we are bringing real leadership here. Carrie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for your enthusiasm for having me on board. I'm so excited to talk to you both about the book that I have coming out and about leadership in general. I've always enjoyed the conversations we had when we worked together at the State Department about how to improve each of ourselves as leaders and how to be better for our teams. And that was really what inspired me to write this book. Is after I retired, after almost 25 years as a diplomat, I realized we had learned a ton of life lessons that coaching was helping me convey to some people, but I think I had enough to say for a wider platform. So I look forward to talking to you all a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you first and foremost for being here and for sharing your vision of leadership, your experiences in leadership, because people often hear leadership, right? And they may have a certain idea of what it really means. And the idea of strategic humanity as your title, what's behind that?
So what's behind that was trying to reflect the leadership model that incorporates not just your head, like your analytical thinking, but also your heart, your compassion for people. And then the third element of strategic humanity is your spine, which is what gives you the courage to be the leader you need to be in difficult situations, whether it be protecting your team from too much pressure above you, or whether it be making a difficult decision that complies with your values, even in the face of whether the institution would agree with those values or not. So it's really just the effort to encapsulate all three of those elements, which together comprise a really excellent leader.
The three of us came up through very similar career tracks at the State Department.
We did.
And, now, State Department isn't widely known for being a crucible for leadership. But we all learned our trade there, learned our craft. And so I'm curious, Carrie, what was it about your time at the State Department that gave flower to this sort of framework for leadership that you've put together in your book?
That's a great question, Hugo. I think in part it was working for people that really inspired me. You were one of them, in the way that they lead people and in the way they led the organization. And I think also that, much like both of you, I worked with people who were a little less inspiring, to be very diplomatic about it. And I just saw that there was a real opportunity to capture for people what worked and what didn't, in a way that was pretty reflective of my experience as a diplomat over the nearly quarter of a century, which makes me sound like a dinosaur, right? Quarter of a century. But I love that.
No, it's
Dinosaurs here, right?
We're all dinosaurs together.
we have lived leadership experience. And for our listeners and followers, when you hear us talk about the State Department and leadership, that does not mean that you're excluded from this if you don't serve in government. Leadership is from where you sit or stand right now. And so, Carrie, one of your quotes in chapter 1, which just really pulled me in. Authority today is not measured by control, but by the calm you can hold when everyone else loses theirs. That is powerful. Yeah. Because I'm a John Maxwell coach. I love his point that leadership is influence, and influence is about holding yourself accountable, that self-leadership piece in the midst, especially when everyone else is losing their mind, right?
Right.
Tell us what inspired you to open with this quote, this chapter about calm.
What inspired me to open with that is toward the very end of my career, I was in my third or fourth crisis of the career. And I was the leader of the team at that point, where I had not been the leader of the team previously in crises. And I was unpleasantly surprised that I did not maintain the calm in the room as well as I thought I would or could. And so some of this comes from my own self-reflection after that crisis. And it also comes from reflecting back on leaders who really did this well, and how different it feels when you walk into a room where your leader is calm versus when they're trying to control the situation, right? The control can feel a little manic, a little oppressive, right? And also very directive usually, which might be needed in a crisis. But I think that to the extent that you can emanate calm and create calm in that space, it is so much better for your team and so much better for you as a leader. You're much more effective, and it's just a happier place in general to be, right? Even if you're under stress, if people are able to stay calm and keep that temperature low.
And that's when you're able to access your creativity. There's headspace for actually thinking through options, whereas when you lose that calm, you are simply reacting.
Yeah.
And not getting ahead of the issues.
You end up with blinders on, right? When you're in that phase of not being calm enough. Head down and
plowing forward, and that's not the best space to be in when you've got, especially multifaceted crisis.
Right.
We, the three of us, are all children of the consular cone. We came up through the consular part of the State Department, Foreign Service, and we've all been exposed to lots of crises. And I will just say, I think it is incredibly self-aware of you to reflect back on the experience and the things you did well and the things that you could have done better. I will just say for everybody who's listening, you never do this perfectly, and you never come out of the box doing it right. And part of being a leader in crisis is the need to learn from trial and error. And the error part is important. Be open to the ways that you could have done things better, and adapt and absorb that. And the blessing for me in my career was, you said you had 3 big crises in your career, Carrie. I had a dozen, right? Between consular affairs and state ops and OCS, the Overseas Citizen Services piece, I feel like I was a crisis bad luck charm. It always seemed to happen on my watch. But I could actually see how it got easier and how I got more calm as each of these, but believe me, I made mistakes in every single one. And that the practice that the State Department generally does pretty well is to hot wash, to go back and say, what could we have done better in that crisis? I found that enormously driving of my growth, enormously beneficial for growing and learning and then incorporating those things. So I get you 100%. And I look back and I look at the crises that I led and the responses that I led, and always think how I could have done that better, but not afraid of the next one, right?
And each one we do better than the last. That's the other thing, right? Practice eventually makes better, not perfect, but better.
Yeah.
Well, that is it. And it does start with that vulnerability and reflecting. And I just want to acknowledge that, Carrie, because being vulnerable and sharing your experience is so that others can also learn, right? So that others don't feel alone. And that's why we have ripple effect leaderships, to share our experiences. Carrie, you talked in the beginning about these three components of the body playing into leadership. Walk us through how these three components of the body create holistic leadership.
Sure. So basically, as a coach and also as a leader myself, I've seen that there are three elements that go into strong leadership. Your head, which is where you do all your analysis and figure out the ideas of what to do next. Your heart, where you connect to your people and really make sure that you've created an environment in which they can contribute and where they feel like their needs are heard and that you're answering their expectations. And then your spine, which is where courage lives, which just gives you the ability to stand up when it's needed, to say this isn't the right thing when that is the case, and to make sure you take the time for your people and not just the analysis, or your analysis and not just the people. It's important to have a balance among all three to truly succeed as a leader. And I think often in a crisis we run away with one or another, right? Like I'm a bit of an empath, so I tend to go down that path of like thinking only of my people and how is this affecting them, and sometimes that means you forget to put on your own oxygen mask, and we all know how important that is, right? If we're going to maintain the calm in the room, we have to take care of ourselves first. And that is kind of anathema to people who are operating out of their heart, right? Who are just like way too connected, heartstring to heartstring to their people. That's you too, right, Jen? Yeah,
it is.
It makes it so hard. And so what I do as a coach is if I hear someone saying to me, I'm in this difficult situation and my people are struggling and I don't really know what to do next. To me, that sounds like they're just way too much in their heart. And so we explore what their head is telling them and what their spine is saying to try to branch out, right? Branch out from that place where you live most of your life, because a lot of us have a strong preference or a strong aptitude for one over another. And so I think what helps is being able to check in with all three.
I love it. Love that. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence here. There's also intelligence, there's IQ, there's EQ, and that continuum of, sliding back and forth. You need both. You need to bring both into your leadership persona. I'm really glad Jen raised the embodiment issue, because I see that so much in the book. And I know for me, as I trained to be a leadership coach, embodiment was eye-opening for me, right? Mm-hmm. I think Van Bessel says, the body keeps the score. And we know that is true, although I found it very difficult to help my clients connect to that body thing. I still find it a little woo-woo, like as I introduce, that concept into my coaching. How do you bring it into your coaching, Carrie? And you have such a beautiful way of explaining that. What is the way that you connect your clients to the things their bodies are telling them?
So usually it's a lot of active listening, right? Seeing them gesture. Often people will give us invisible signals, right, of what is actually happening in their body. They'll hold their chest for a second. They'll, rub their head or something to give a hint to us of what's going on with them. Where is it? Where are they feeling it? They're probably describing what they're feeling on a surface level, right? But then once you read their body language back to them, I see that you're like really struggling with this in your heart, it looks like, or in your chest. What are you feeling right now, right there? What's going on for you? And just drawing the attention, I think, is the most natural way to do it, right? Because they've given you an indicator on their own. I find it harder to introduce it out of nowhere, if that makes sense. Like, I think it has to come organically through the conversation. And then sometimes it's more of they are speaking words that sound very associated with just one part of the body. And so I'll ask them to take a different perspective, right? Your head is telling you X, Y, Z. What is your heart telling you right now? Right? And that's not horribly woo-woo. Maybe it's a little bit woo-woo, but it's
It's holistic.
I'm going to try that with my clients.
It is holistic, which I appreciate.
Exactly. And you talk about in the book, influence begins long before you speak, which
Yes.
totally agree, right? It's that trust building connection. And then you get into the ethics of influence. And this piece really speaks to me because it is how, and you call it distinguishing ethical influence from manipulation or over accommodation.
Yep.
Talk to us about how you maintain authentic ethical leadership versus trying to lead people, especially as a leader, right? You're trying to guide people. So
Right.
where's that line, and how do you know when it shows up?
So I think for a lot of people, it shows up with a weird feeling in the pit of their stomach, right? I think we all get that kind of second guessing of ourselves when we know we're headed down a path that maybe we wouldn't usually want to be taking.
The body again?
The body again, right? Like, doesn't it? It really, at least my body talks to me all the time. Maybe my body's
Mine
a little
too.
too loud.
Mine is always saying, I'm a little peckish. I would love to see.
I would love to have a snack right about now. Yes, exactly. And so for me, it's often something I feel in my gut. For clients, I think often the way we realize it is they say something along the lines of, I've got this big thing that I have to do, and yet I'm not 100% sure I want to do it, or that I know how to do it, or that and they won't necessarily say that it aligns with their values, but something that indicates that, right? Like, I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable with X. And for me, what I do with my clients is I coach them through their values, which I'm sure you guys do too, right? You try to identify what are those values that you will never, ever let go of, that always have to be in place, versus your values that are negotiable and maybe should be a little more flexible. So for example, in the book, I write about one of my values for a very long time in the State Department was perfectionism and being like the world's quickest responder to everything, right? Like immediate email responses, no typos. This was the way that I ran myself as an officer, right? And then when you become a boss, you realize you're exhausting your people because perfect is impossible to achieve, right? Like when we're moving so fast, perfect is unattainable. And so I decided that was no longer a value of mine. A value of mine was high quality. Now, sometimes I've had bosses who've still said perfection was it. Hugo was not one of them, but we all worked for one of them together.
Well, I don't hear myself at all in this because I retired with like more than 100,000 unread emails. So that was not my thing.
But I also tell a story in the book about I had a really wonderful boss who said to me, sometimes issues are better left to simmer for a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you jump in too soon and you've cut off the conversation. You know, if there's 10 people on an email chain and I'm always the first one to chime in with my opinion or with the next step or whatever, I've cut off the contributions of those 9 other people, some of whom might be a better place to answer the question, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was really an interesting epiphany that I had. And then another example I have is that when I worked for an ambassador who I loved, she was wonderful to work for, one of the first things she told me is that when she walks into a meeting, she doesn't express her opinion until the end. And I thought, that's very interesting. She said, I'm actively listening. I'm collecting the information from my colleagues. But if I say up front what my opinion is, or if I present the issue in a certain way, that is the way we're going to go. Right? And I don't want to cut off that conversation. That conversation is very valuable to me and shapes the decision I'm going to make. So I thought that was very interesting too, because I think when you think about ethical influence versus being, like you said, Jen, like a leader who's out there charging forward, right? You're a leader and your followers should be following you. Sometimes the most powerful form of leadership is just sitting back and letting them tell you what's going on, right? So that you know that you're fully informed before you make your final decision. So that's another story I tell in the book that for me was a light bulb moment in the Foreign Service, because we always feel like we're the ones who need to know the most and say the most and talk the fastest or whatever. I still talk fast. Sorry.
No, but your point's so spot on, right? It's like as leaders, we think we have to have all the answers. We think we're
Right.
supposed to show up first. when in fact our job as leaders is to step back.
It's more powerful for sure.
More powerful.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I think they feel like you trust them, right? If you sit back and let others give their opinions and the thoughts that they have, then you're creating that space of trust.
Definitely
Letting go
creates a
of
space
control.
trust. I think it also, I mean, the power of a team is the additive effect of having everybody's opinions heard and brought into conversation. And if the leader is the only one having ideas, you're leaving out so many potential courses of action.
Exactly.
And so your job is to raise up the voices around you, make sure that they're all in conversation so that you're going to get the best possible outcome, that kind of combined effect of having everybody feel trusted, seen, safe enough to venture an opinion,
right?
Creating that fearless workplace so that you get the best out of everybody. I was mentioning earlier, we talked about this concept in one of my leadership classes this week, because really high EI allows you to be super persuasive, right? You talked about being an empath, and you learn early on, when you have that skill to wield in a really a powerful way, you can do a lot with it, both for good and for evil, right? You can certainly manipulate people with a strong emotional intelligence. The importance is in your own self-awareness to recognize that this isn't about you. It is not about you achieving whatever you personally think is the objective. And a lot of times that might be an egocentric approach, right? Like, I really want this to happen, so I need to manipulate the people around me to make it happen. To be very careful wielding and go into that conversation knowing what is, let me put it this way. My responsibility isn't to serve my own ego. My responsibility is to serve something greater as a leader. And when I am going to encourage and persuade, it needs to be in service of that greater good, not simply my own glory or my own accomplishment.
And I think it's important too to remember that manipulation can undermine trust. And once you've lost trust, it's so much harder to rebuild it again.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's so true. You talk about trust a lot in the book, which I find super powerful, right? Trust is the keystone to great leadership.
And so, Carrie, as you were talking about trust, right? And once it's broken, being so hard to rebuild, and that's if you can. So how do you propose that building that trust and checking in on trust in the relationships you cultivate?
That's a great question, Jen. So I think that one of the main ways that I build trust and where I coach my clients on how to build trust is to bring as much authenticity as you can to your team, to be your real self and to try to demonstrate your values, not just speak them, right? To really model who you are as a leader and who you'd like them to be as a team. And then always remembering that you have team members who need different things from you. And trying to meet each of them where they're at so that the trust can build more naturally with each person. I think it's harder if you try to build trust all at once with a team of 20 people, right? I think for me, one-on-one or smaller groups has been more effective. And the way I check in on trust is I try to, in every meeting, make sure every single person is heard. And I also do, which I learned from Hugo, I think I do one-on-ones with everyone on my team. Very regularly. And I feel like those are where you both build the trust and also check if the trust is eroding at all, right? Are they bringing you stuff or are they shut down? And it's easy to figure that out in a smaller setting with one person at a time. But the large group, you could have 4 or 5 people who aren't contributing and you don't know if that means they don't feel safe anymore, or does that mean that they are just quiet that day or they don't have anything to contribute on the topic. So I feel like those one-on-ones are so essential to building the trust originally and then checking in on it as you go forward.
That's awesome.
You talk about the art of the diplomatic apology.
I've exercised that a lot.
Me too.
When you mess up a lot, it's good to apologize.
Knowledge. Oh, yeah, I have a big few of those, so I get it. Walk us through that.
The art of the diplomatic apology. So I think basically what that section is talking about is when trust has eroded, one of the best things you can do is acknowledge that up front and take ownership of your part in it, right? I'm not sure what happened here is a perfectly fine thing to say. Maybe they'll tell you what happened. Maybe they'll tell you where you messed up. But creating that opportunity where you say, I'm really sorry. We seem to have gotten to a place that isn't very productive. And I'm really sorry for my role in that. And could you help me understand a little better? How did we get here? And how can we rebuild? How can we get back to where we were? What can I do to help you get back to where we were? And really taking ownership of your part in whatever the rupture was, right? And I call it a diplomatic apology because I've definitely had people who, I don't know if you use the word weaponize, but people who like over apologize, and after a while it loses its authenticity. They're just kind of abusing their team and then apologizing for it every time that it happens. And so just making sure that you're authentic in your apology and that you are really tailoring it to that situation and that person. Oof. If that makes sense.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So a couple thoughts come to mind here, Carrie, because I know I have been guilty of over apologizing, even from an authentic place.
Yep.
And feedback I received is that when I say that over and over, it does lose value. And a great colleague of ours, great friend of ours, shout out to Mike, taught me, instead of saying I'm sorry, say thank you for your patience. And reframing that as a thank you in some cases is just as powerful. And something else that you said in here, acknowledging your own part, and you call it the art of the diplomatic apology, but this applies to real life. This applies to families and friendships and community. Like, this is not just State Department diplomacy or the private sector, right? This is life.
Diplomacy is real life. Although it may not seem like it to people who haven't lived it, right? But I mean, all we do as diplomats is try to figure out how to hopefully ethically influence others and represent the United States to the best of our ability and make connections with people and lead through crises. And all of those things are things that are done outside the State Department as well. And I think a lot of the leadership lessons learned since I left the State Department have been very interesting to me because it's so similar in the private sector in many ways, right? They're struggling with the same problems as we are in the public sector. We just don't cross-pollinate enough to really realize that, I think. At least we don't from the diplomatic side, right? Like, I'm not sure that I knew exactly how the private sector was working when I was in public service for so many years. And now I feel like I better understand. And the book is really tailored to try to represent leadership lessons for everyone, not just for diplomats. It's definitely a broader focus. It's just that my 25 years of experience was as a diplomat. So that definitely flavors the whole book.
So, my reflection has been that diplomacy is the art of building relationships. That is like the fundamental core of it. And so over 20 plus years, that's what we've been working on. But when you draw back, that's life, right? That's work in the private sector, whether it's sales or consulting. It's about building trust-based relationships. So for me, I've seen it just apply and apply and apply in everything. It applies in academia. It applies in college sports. So I think that all of these things that you are drawing out in the book are going to be resonant for anybody who's in a position of leadership with responsibility for building relationships with those that work for them or those that play for them or those they teach. Right? It is absolutely valuable guidance and insight. Now I have a hard question for you guys, for both of you.
Carrie, you're up first.
So we talk about the art of the apology. And it is a superpower. We know that because we've all had to learn it the hard way, right? Why is it so hard for people to apologize?
Oh. I think this gets back to what you were saying earlier about ego, right, Hugo? And the question of, as a leader, it's really people can get really wrapped up in the ego involved in being in charge or being the head of something. And I think they feel like apologizing undermines their stature or undermines their reputation in some way. And so they worry about the reputational risk of apology. Whereas I would say that I don't think my reputation ever took a hit when I owned up to having done something wrong. In fact, usually it was the opposite. People really appreciate that you are someone who's strong enough to say, this didn't happen the way I would have liked, and let me go back and fix it. And I'll make sure it doesn't happen this way again. So I hope does that answer your question, Hugo?
Yeah, great insights.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I wonder what you're thinking.
Well, I echo that. I'm with you, Carrie. I remember I had so many big mistakes, right? Because we're human. And when you can own them, learn from them, it's how you become better. But I remember one in particular. I missed a really important deadline. My team missed it. This was not about blaming my team. I owned it. I went into a pretty senior leader and said, I screwed this up. And he said to me, what do I need to do to help you? And I thought, oh my gosh, like here I am. That was a time I over apologized, but it was well deserved. And he had my back fully. And we got a message out. He ran some interference while we scrambled to make things right? That's what you do, but you own it. And when you come in from an authentic place of understanding impact and offering a solution, not just I'm sorry, but here's a solution to help make this right. Mm-hmm. And, that to me has just been pretty powerful. And I want to talk, though, about how the apology is part of an inner circle of influence, because we're all humans, right? And as you grow and things happen, there may be space, where you have some friction. As you're, growing as a leader, your inner circle starting to change. How do you handle that growth and perhaps change of your inner coherence?
Oh my gosh, Jen, that's such a deep question. I love it.
I'm in a deep mood.
I'll try to go there with you. So I think the best way that I found to handle those transitions when you move into like a different position of leadership or a different time in your leadership, I think I would come back to those one-on-ones where you build trust with your team. And also, I love what you said about your circle of influence changing, right? Being really cognizant of that. Who is in your inner circle? And being very intentional about making sure that they know they are in your inner circle, that they're your trusted advisors, that, you're there for them and you appreciate that they're there for you. Because the higher up you get as a leader in any organization, the lonelier you become, right? And I think that's pretty true in any kind of organization, that it's harder and harder to find those inner circle of people that you trust the higher up you get, because you don't have very many peers anymore that you can go to. And so I think it's really important to be very proactive and intentional. And I'll go back to our friend Mike, our mutual friend Mike, who was really proactive about reaching out to fellow people in the similar position as him in the State Department and creating those relationships of trust, so that we all had each other's backs and we could work better together as a team.
That is so true.
Yeah.
We've all transitioned out of the State Department, and what someone said to me when I transitioned out is, how are you creating your board of directors? And I said, what are you talking about? But that was it. Like, who am I now surrounding myself with? And so wherever you find yourself, listeners, who is surrounding you? And as Carrie said, are you being intentional and having that conversation to make sure you're on the same page about how they fit into your inner circle?
Yeah.
I love that, Carrie.
Thanks.
Can I add something really quickly that we did in class this week that I always find impactful? So Mike Krzyzewski was the coach of the Duke Blue Devils basketball team, tells the story about when he was heading off to high school in New York City. And before he left the house on his first day of high school, his mom stopped him and said, make sure you get on the right bus. And he said, Mom, I've grown up in the city. I know you take this bus to that bus, you change there, you go to this bus, it'll get me to the high school. She said, that's not the bus I mean. She said, make sure that you build these new relationships in high school, that you surround yourself with the right kind of people, the kind of people that are going to have your best interest at heart, that are going to be interested in your development. And he talks about how that colored his whole life. And he said, sometimes I drive the bus, sometimes I'm riding on other people's bus, but I'm always aware of who's on my bus with me. And if you don't surround yourself with the people that will give you good guidance in tough times, who will tell you, that the emperor has no clothes, right? They'll tell you that, this is probably not a good idea, or this doesn't seem like it is the authentic to who you are. They need to know who you are and have your best interests at heart. And that's when Jen talks about her board of advisors, like that's what it means. Your kitchen cabinet, who are you surrounding yourself with, so that when you're having a tough moment, you've got someone to reach out to and they know where you're coming from. So important. And so if you're out there in the world leading, make sure you have folks that you can talk to, that you can trust, who know you and have your best interest at heart.
Right. We talk about the 5 people closest to you, right? Look around, take a look at those 5 people, right? Yeah. So that also brings into question boundaries and well-being. And, Carrie, I have to go there. And I know this is a big one for you. Walk us through how you address that key piece of leadership in strategic humanity.
So one of the key things there for me is learning the boundaries of my team. The individuals on your team, what's a go and what's a no-go for them. And it's not going to be the same across the team. I think that's pretty clear. Like I've had people who worked for me who just really wanted to work 60, 70 hours a week. They just wanted to do that. And so they didn't have a boundary around working past 6, right? And then you have other people on the team who will give you everything, heart and soul, for 40 hours a week, right? Between this and this time, because I have children, a dog, a mother, I have other responsibilities and other lifestyle things I need to do. And so I think for me, plugging in first to those boundaries and figuring out what the team needed from me as a leader was part of me establishing boundaries going up the chain. My own boundaries evolved very late in life, I would say. Boundaries was not something I knew much about maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I think it's been a more recent phenomenon in my life. And I like to think that I learned it in my more busy jobs, where I basically have had to say hard stop so I can have time with my family and time for myself and time to recharge. And we've had some great role models in that, right? Who block out time on their calendar to go to the gym, or who are on, one of the people I worked for ages ago would be on her exercise bike in the morning when we did our first call. So just, I think having seen, if you know who that is, right, Hugo? I feel like Hugo might know who that is.
I'm actually guilty of that myself.
I know.
I have too, but my new thing is to try to focus and not multitask.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But I love that, right? So the idea of boundaries, knowing your team's boundaries in individual capacities and using those in conjunction with your own boundaries as a way to present like a fuller vision of how you operate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that when I create my boundaries that they reflect what the team has told me as well, right? So I think it's much easier to uphold your boundaries if you're being authentic about them, right? Like I will say, and this has happened in every job I've been in, I will say, I won't answer emails on the weekend unless they're urgent, or I won't check my emails on the weekend. You have to call me. And yet inevitably, it seems in every position I've been in, that boundary has eroded because of the way we currently live. We're all on our phones all the time, and that's where we access our work stuff. And so it's just so easy for things to meld into each other. And so just trying to be very intentional, remembering that if I don't model my boundaries, then my team's not going to believe that they're boundaries. And so I just need to make sure that I fulfill what I've said is the boundary.
Because they will hear what you're saying. but they're going to model their behavior off of what you do.
Exactly.
Right? That is the true north for them. They watch you as a leader, and they take that as the real gospel, no matter what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Carrie, as we get ready to come to a close here today, walk us through your personal reflection about being human first and how this book is shaping you into your next chapter.
Oh, I love that, Jen. How's it shaping me into my next chapter? So I think having written this book has been a really exciting experience for me, trying to close the chapter, no longer a diplomat, transitioning to coaching, much like both of you. And then just thinking about the lessons that I've learned and how I can convey those to people and how that will inform my coaching has been very powerful. I think that being human first is something that I've actually done from the beginning of my career. So I'm kind of proud of that. Like, I think I've always understood the need to connect with people. I might be very strong in the heart, maybe, right? Like I need to connect with people and I need to know that they're okay. And I do my best to make sure that that's true. So the humanity part was very easy for me. The part of strategic humanity that was harder for me is the strategic, believe it or not. Like I've pretty much had a spine for most of my career. It got stronger as I got older in the service. But yeah, the strategic part of it was not something that came naturally to me. And so I think just making sure that I don't lose my humanity in those moments where the strategy is needed, and that I always keep in touch with my spine. Super important.
Don't lose my humanity in the moments when strategy is needed.
Yeah.
That is a foot stomp right there, Carrie.
Foot stomp.
Stomp. All right, that's a little State Department jargon for us all. Foot stomp. So, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. This has just been completely amazing. And I'm so excited for you and for Strategic Humanity and all of its impact. Share with us how we can find Strategic Humanity and how we can find you.
Well, I will provide you with a link to the book as soon as it's published, so you can put that in the show notes. And it will be published on Amazon, so easy to find. If you Google Strategic Humanity with my name, you should find it. And I'm on LinkedIn with my name, Carrie Muntean. I'm easy peasy to find on LinkedIn as well. So I've connected with a lot of great people through that platform, and I look forward to hearing from more. And thank you both for having me. This was so fun.
Oh, amazing. For those who are listening, this is Carrie Muntean, Carrie, last name Muntean. So find her on LinkedIn, look for Strategic Humanity. Hugo, you had some thoughts.
I just have to say how incredible it is. I've had the blessing of knowing you both for so many years and seeing you grow as diplomats and as leaders and as authors, both of you. I just feel lucky to have been along on your journey and love to see what you're doing and being a small part of it. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Carrie, I want a signed copy. I will drive up and get that from you. I am so excited for this book. You are speaking to my heart. So
I love it. I can't
wait. For all of you out there listening, please drop us a comment. Tell us what you're interested in. If you want to know more about Carrie, find her on LinkedIn. Check our show notes. Carrie, it's such a joy to see you, reconnect with you. So excited for your next chapter and book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Ripple Effect Leadership Podcast. If this episode sparked an insight or reminded you of someone, please share it and help forward the ripple. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review so more leaders can find their way here. You can find us on LinkedIn at Jen Brown-Coach and at HF Rodriguez Jr. and more leadership content and coaching tools at journeyofgracecoaching.com. A quick heads up before you go. This podcast and all content shared by Ripple Effect Leadership is for informational and educational purposes only. The opinions and characterizations in this podcast are our own and do not necessarily represent the U.S. government. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment or professional medical advice. If you are struggling, we encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health provider or call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You don't have to do this alone.